I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you look out your living room window and you see this massive fire burning right down the street.
Right.
It's huge, you know.
Yeah.
You can see the smoke billowing up. You can literally feel the heat rattling in the glass. So naturally, you call the fire department.
Yeah, you'd panic.
Exactly. You turn on the local news to see the coverage. You check your phone for alerts. But the fire chief issues a formal statement saying, there's absolutely no fire.
Wow.
The news anchors on your TV are chatting about a completely different town.
Yeah.
And your neighbors.
Yeah.
They just pull their blind shut and go about their daily routines.
Which is, I mean, that's deeply unsettling.
It's terrifying. The fire is real. It is destroying homes. But structurally, officially, it just doesn't exist.
It creates this terrifying kind of cognitive dissonance. Because it's one thing to be in physical danger, right? But it's another thing entirely when the institutions that are literally designed to acknowledge your reality to protect you collectively agree to just look the other way.
And that terrifying disconnect, that's exactly the heart of what we're unpacking today. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are looking at a profoundly sobering piece of investigative commentary.
Yes.
It was published in the Ethiopian Tribune, dated today, actually, June 4, 2026. It's titled, "The Church They Cannot Name."
It's a really heavy piece.
It is. Our mission here is to explore a phenomenon the author calls structural silence. We are asking a very specific question, which is, how does a massive humanitarian crisis unfold in plain sight with staggering human cost without making a single ripple in international headlines?
And I think we really need to tread carefully here right at the start.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the political landscape in Ethiopia right now is just a minefield of deeply rooted, incredibly complex conflicts.
Yeah.
We're talking about immense suffering occurring across multiple ethnic and regional lines, affecting Tigrayans, Oromos, Amharas, and so many others.
Right. There's not a simple situation.
Yeah, exactly. So we aren't here today to solve that puzzle or, take a side or endorse any faction's political viewpoint. We are just looking rigorously at the facts, the arguments, and the media critiques exactly as they're presented in this one specific source by the Ethiopian Tribune. We just want to understand the mechanics of media silence.
Right. We have to ask, how does a fire get ignored? And to figure that out, we first have to look at the fire itself, the facts on the ground in a region called the Arsi zone.
Right.
Once we see the scale of the violence, then we can trace exactly how the smoke is being hidden from the rest of the world. And, the source opens with a detail that it stops you in your tracks.
It really does.
It's November 2025. A 10-year-old boy is shot in a teff field in the Merti district of Arsi, which, by the way, if you aren't familiar, teff is this ubiquitous staple grain in Ethiopia.
Yeah, it's what they used to make injera.
Exactly. So imagine a kid just out in an everyday farm field, gunned down.
And his leg had to be amputated.
Yes. He survives, and a photo of him circulates briefly on Ethiopian social media, and then it just vanishes.
Completely gone.
Major global outlets like the BBC, Al Jazeera, CNN, they report absolutely nothing. No correspondent is dispatched, no segment is filed.
And what the Ethiopian Tribune meticulously documents is that this was not some tragic, isolated incident that just sort of slipped through the cracks.
No.
The scale of the violence is staggering. The source states that between September and November 2025, over 140 Orthodox Christians were killed in the Shirka district of Arsi alone.
Wait, 40 in just one district?
In one district. And if you look at the night of October 24th to 25th, there were coordinated attacks across multiple districts that left at least 24 people dead in a single night.
My God.
And the victims, they included an 86-year-old and a toddler.
It's just horrific. And this wasn't a brief flare-up either, right? Because the source notes the violence continued deep into early 2026.
Yeah.
In February, 20 people were killed at a market in East Arsi. 2 days later, gunmen literally entered a church and opened fire on worshipers.
Right.
Thousands of people displaced. We are talking about mass atrocities happening over months.
Which brings us to the official narrative. And this is where that dynamic of the fire outside your window really takes hold.
Yeah, the denial.
Exactly. You have all these confirmed dead. The graves are dug, the communities are shattered. Yet the Oromia Regional Administration's Arsi Zone administrator, a man named Ibrahim Kadir, stated on the record that, quote, no one was killed.
I have to stop and push back on this because it defies logic.
It does.
How can an official stand up at a podium and say no one was killed when the state's own human rights body, the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, confirmed these killings.
Right.
They literally documented the murders of farmers in these exact districts, including the 10-year-old boy in the teff field.
Yeah.
How can the regional police call the area peaceful with a straight face when their own federal government agencies are documenting the bodies?
I mean, the contradiction is glaring. But as the author argues, this level of denial isn't just clumsy PR.
What is it, then?
It is a deliberate policy of erasure. Take the Interreligious Council, for example. They released this really vague report claiming the victims in Arsi were not from one faith group.
Even though local church leaders explicitly confirmed the targeted killings of their specific congregations.
Exactly. The goal there is to depoliticize and neutralize the violence. When the state denies the dead and local authorities muddy the waters with vague statements, they create a smokescreen.
Right.
And because international media is already, overwhelmed and kind of looking away, those victims effectively disappear from the global historical record.
So if the smoke is being deliberately hidden, we need to understand why the victims are so easily ignored by the rest of the world.
Yeah, the why is crucial here.
And the source points out that it comes down to how these victims are categorized.
Right, which leads us directly into their weaponization of a label. To really grasp this, we need to understand the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, or the EOTC.
Right. The source spends a lot of time on this history, and it's fascinating. The EOTC is ancient. It was founded in the 4th century.
Way back.
Yeah. It is a pan-Ethiopian institution that predates the very concept of Amhara as a political identity by over 1,000 years. Its liturgical traditions are shared across Tigrayan, Amhara, and many Oromo communities.
Yeah, in fact, the author notes that roughly 45% of the Oromo population is Christian.
Which is huge. So it is a vast, deeply rooted, multi-ethnic institution. But since the early 1990s, the political landscape in Ethiopia has shifted dramatically.
It has.
The author points out that the country has operated under a system of ethnic federalism.
Yes.
Wait, before we go on, for you listening who might not be East Africa experts, what exactly does ethnic federalism look like in practice? Are we talking about drawing state lines based entirely on ancestry?
Essentially, yes. In the 1990s, Ethiopia reorganized its internal borders to create regions based largely on ethno-linguistic groups.
Okay.
So, Oromia for the Oromo, Amhara for the Amhara, Tigray for the Tigrayans, and so on.
I see.
The intention was to give different groups self-determination, but the practical result is this hyper-polarized environment where political power, land rights, and resources are intimately tied to your ethnic identity.
Oh, wow.
And in this landscape, ethno-nationalist discourse has actively worked to rebrand the EOTC. They've framed the church not as a universal multi-ethnic faith, but as a vehicle for Amhara cultural supremacy.
Like a relic of an old imperial order.
Exactly.
It would be like if, overnight, the media and the government suddenly labeled every single Catholic living in Texas as a Vatican operative.
That's a great analogy.
You've instantly stripped away their status as everyday citizens, neighbors, and farmers, and rebranded them as foreign political agents. That's what's happening with the Amhara label here. What is the strategic advantage of doing this?
It unlocks a terrifying, lethal logic. The source breaks this down chillingly. When an Orthodox Christian farmer in Arsi, who might be ethnically Oromo, whose family might have farmed that exact land for generations, is killed, the political framing kicks in.
Right.
Officially, they are labeled an Amhara Christian in Oromia.
So by applying that label, the victim is no longer an Ethiopian citizen requiring state protection.
They're recategorized as an ethnic encroacher. Their very presence on the land, simply by virtue of their faith being tied to this false ethnic label, is framed as a political provocation.
Think about what this means for you watching the evening news. If you hear a news anchor talk about an ethnic encroacher killed in a territorial dispute over regional borders, you probably think, wow, that's a really complex, deeply historical, local conflict. Both sides probably have claims.
Yeah, you just shrug it off.
Exactly. You shrug it off. But if you hear that every day farmers and toddlers are being gunned down purely because of their religion and their perceived ethnicity, you immediately recognize it as targeted persecution.
Because language shapes reality.
Totally. By forcing a diverse religious community into a rigid political and ethnic box, the perpetrators make the violence seem like a natural, if tragic, byproduct of a land dispute.
And the author emphasizes that this is literally the grammar of all modern ethnic cleansing.
From the Balkans in the 90s to Myanmar today.
Exactly. You categorize the target community as alien, you absorb their victimization into a messy, both sides ethnic narrative, and then you just rely on the international community to throw their hands up and opt for studied neutrality.
Let me play devil's advocate for a moment, though.
Sure.
I can hear a skeptic listening to this and saying, look, the world is on fire right now. There are massive crises everywhere. Ethiopia alone has had devastating large-scale conflicts in Tigray, in Amhara and Oromia over the last few years.
Right.
Doesn't international media just have limited bandwidth?
Yeah.
Surely foreign desks in London and New York can't cover every single atrocity in a country with over 120 million people?
It's a fair question, and the source actually anticipates that exact objection. They counter it with a very revealing comparison. In June 2025, the Amhara Church in Damascus, Syria, was bombed, tragically killing 30 people.
Right, I remember that.
That event received immediate, massive, wall-to-wall global coverage, detailed analysis, expert commentary, front-page news.
Meanwhile, in the Arsi zone, you have over 140 confirmed dead in a single district over a few months, churches being attacked, and absolute zero.
Nothing. If the Syrian bombing gets saturation coverage and the Ethiopian massacres do not, the differential cannot just be a lack of resources or bandwidth.
So what is it?
It comes down to what the author calls narrative legibility.
Narrative legibility.
Yeah. The Syrian victims fit a pre-existing, easily understood Western media narrative. An endangered Christian minority, an Islamist militant perpetrator set against the backdrop of a complex Middle Eastern state.
So the editors in New York and London know exactly how to package that story for their audiences.
Exactly. But Ethiopian Orthodox Christians being killed by local militants in a region governed by a Nobel Peace Prize-winning prime minister's political party.
That doesn't fit any neat template.
Not at all. It creates friction for editors. That brings us to the structural architecture that ensures this silence.
The 4 pillars.
Yes. The source outlines several overlapping mechanisms that we can think of as the pillars of invisibility. First is the framing problem we just discussed.
Because the church is falsely coded as an Amhara institution, the violence is viewed as both sides' ethnic conflict.
Right. And international news editors are incredibly cautious about touching messy ethnic disputes they don't fully grasp.
Yeah, they don't want to get the nuance wrong, so they just don't cover it at all.
Which is pillar 1. Then you have pillar 2. The physical barrier of access.
The checkpoints.
Yes. The regional government is not hospitable to independent journalism in these areas. There are military checkpoints everywhere. Local sources who try to leak information or take photos of the aftermath are routinely arrested.
Which forces foreign desks to rely on official government sources. And if a reporter can't get past a checkpoint in Oromia, they call the regional administrator.
And we already know what the regional administrator says.
Nothing happened here.
Exactly.
So really, it's a perfect storm. You've got the physical barrier where reporters literally can't get to the story, and then you have this weird psychological barrier where international organizations don't even know how to advocate for the victims.
Yes.
The source calls this third pillar the denominational blind spot.
This is a fascinating, if grim, insight into how global advocacy works.
Yeah, tell me about this.
Well, Western NGOs and human rights networks operate on very specific funding models and cultural priorities.
Right.
They are typically mobilized by violence against secular groups, modern political dissidents, or specifically cultivated minority demographics.
Okay.
Orthodox Christianity, to many of these Western institutions, is perceived as conservative, traditional, or archaic.
So it doesn't fit the vibe.
It simply doesn't trigger the same emotional urgency or fit into the established networking pipelines of international human rights advocacy.
Wow. And then finally, you have structural exclusion, which is the 4th pillar. Amhara voices and those advocating for these Orthodox communities are systematically kept off international expert panels, think tank discussions, and news broadcasts.
And this isn't just a, theoretical grievance about representation.
Right.
The source provides a jaw-dropping, literal example of this happening on live television.
Yeah, let's set the scene for this, because I want you, the listener, to really picture this. Think about the last time you watched the news while cooking dinner. You see a panel of experts on a split screen.
Yeah.
You just assume the anchor is guiding the conversation to bring you the most urgent truth. You have no idea what is being left on the cutting room floor.
None at all.
So the date is June 2026. It is the day of the Ethiopian general election. TRT World, which is a major international broadcaster, airs a 29-minute segment ostensibly designed to provide a balanced view of the election and the fears of renewed civil war.
And the roster of guests they choose is incredibly revealing. First, they feature a solo interview with Getachew Reda. He is currently an advisor to Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, representing the establishment view.
Just to interject, the source mentions Reda is also a former senior official of the TPLF. That's the Tigray People's Liberation Front, right?
Wow.
The group that fought that massive, brutal war against the federal government recently.
Yes, exactly. The TPLF and the federal government fought a devastating war from 2020 to 2022.
Yep.
Now, there is a fragile peace agreement, and figures like Reda are integrated into the political establishment. So after his interview, TRT World brings on a panel of 3 analysts to represent alternative perspectives.
Who did they bring on?
You have Maza Gede-Gebremedin and Sedale Lema. Both are highly informed analysts, but both fundamentally view the situation through the lens of Tigrayan concerns and Red Sea geopolitics.
Okay.
And then you have one Amhara representative, Robel Alemu, the director of communications at the Amhara Association of America.
One Amhara voice on a panel discussing a country where Amhara communities are at the absolute center of ongoing violence.
Yes.
But here's the incredible part. Robel Alemu gets his turn to speak. And in just 90 seconds, he delivers this devastating, rapid-fire list of facts. It's like he knows he only has a tiny window before the anchor cuts him off.
He had to cram it all in.
Yeah. He names the Lemkin Institute's active genocide alert for the Amhara people. He cites 370 aerial drone strikes by state forces against civilian infrastructure, schools, clinics, churches.
He brings up a BBC report documenting mass rape implicating government forces.
Right.
He cites UNICEF data showing 9 million children out of school, half of them in the Amhara region.
And then, the climax of his 90 seconds. He states, on live global television, that on that very day, Election Day, an active massacre is taking place in the Arsi area.
Yeah.
Local militants are actively attacking ethnic Amhara and Orthodox Christian communities while the panel is literally speaking.
He put the ultimate reality right on the table. He named Arsi, and what happens next is the perfect distillation of structural erasure.
It's wild.
The presenter thanks him and then immediately
Pivots to the next guest, Maza, to ask her about the potential for a new war with Eritrea.
Exactly.
And that's it. Nobody returns to a single point Robel made. The genocide alert. Ignored. The 370 drone strikes. Ignored. The active ongoing massacre happening that very day in Arsi. It completely vanishes from the conversation in 30 seconds.
But the author of the Ethiopian Tribune piece makes a very careful, crucial point here that we really need to emphasize.
Okay, yeah.
This was not a malicious, coordinated conspiracy by the other panelists or the anchor.
Right.
Maza was offering genuine concern about Tigrayan vulnerability. Sedale Lema was offering well-informed analysis about Red Sea geopolitics, which is her area of expertise.
Yeah, they were just doing their jobs.
And the presenter wasn't actively trying to cover up a massacre. She was a professional managing a tight broadcast clock before a commercial break.
Everyone was just doing their job. But, I mean, that is exactly what makes it so chilling.
Yeah.
The sum of those individual decisions, the aggregate effect of perfectly ordinary professional editorial choices, was the complete burial of an active massacre.
It wasn't mustache-twirling censorship.
No. It was just polite professionals moving on to the next topic on the teleprompter.
It is the architecture of attention functioning exactly as it was built to function. You know, the initial panel composition, the distribution of follow-up questions, the editorial priorities decided in a morning meeting.
All of it.
Yeah, they all combined to ensure that the systemic killing of Orthodox Christians in Arsi was rendered invisible even when a guest spoke the truth aloud on international television.
So let's synthesize everything we've journeyed through today. We started with the tragic, visceral reality of a 10-year-old boy in a teff field.
Right.
We saw how the ancient identity of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church was politically weaponized, how a diverse religious group was forced into a narrow ethnic label to recategorize citizens as encroachers, basically pre-authorizing the violence against them. We unpacked the physical and psychological barriers that keep international media and human rights groups away. And finally, we watched a TV studio mute an active massacre through nothing more than a polite editorial pivot.
So if there is a core takeaway for you as you go about your day, it's about your relationship with the information you consume.
Yeah.
You rely on the media to show you the world. You trust that if something truly horrific is happening, it will break through the noise. But this deep dive proves that silence is just as much a part of the story as the headlines.
Absolutely.
The absence of reporting isn't always proof of peace. often what we don't see is the result of a highly structured, systemic architecture that decides whose suffering is legible to the global public and whose suffering is simply inconvenient to explain.
It really forces you to look at your newsfeed differently. Which brings us back to that fire outside your window. The one the authorities say isn't there, the one the news ignores. If the mechanism of erasure isn't usually overt, heavy-handed censorship, but rather the polite, ordinary mechanics of editorial selection, guest booking, and panel composition, how many other fires are burning right now just outside the frame of your daily newsfeed, simply because they didn't fit the expected narrative?
And honestly, it makes you wonder, as our news becomes increasingly driven by algorithms designed to serve us only what's neat and engaging, how much of that structural silence is now being automated?
Oh, wow. Yeah, if the algorithm is learning from those polite editorial pivots, it might be erasing those fires before a human editor even sees the smoke.
It is a question that demands our constant vigilance as consumers of information.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the silence, and we'll see you next time.